I'm Gerd Leonhard, futurist in Zurich, Switzerland. I have a good friend, Joseph Press, with me today. Joseph is the co-founder of a new organization, a collective called Make Our Future, based in Switzerland, but all over the world. And they just wrote a new book, or he wrote a book together with Bob Johansen and Christine Bullen, and it's called Office Shock. And we work together on various clients and projects, so I wanted to ask Joseph about what this book is all about and why you wrote it.
Well, thanks, Gerd. It's wonderful to be here. Always a pleasure to come and chat, and really excited about the opportunity to talk Office Shock. Office Shock was actually written with the Institute for the Future. So Bob Johansen, one of the long-term futurists and executive director of the Institute for the Future for a number of years. Christine Bullen did her research at MIT, written a number of books as well, also associated with the Institute. And essentially, we had the opportunity to ask and research the future of the workplace. And that question came up from a Swiss furniture company, USM, who you might be familiar with. And the CEO of USM said, look, we want to know about the future of the workplace, but we're more interested in triggering a conversation about the workplace because we know the workplace needs to change. It needs to change for us to be able to move towards what you describe as the good future. And in our research, we realized or learned that that path to the good future is pretty complex. It's systemic. And in the book, we actually identified 7 spectrums of areas that we might be able to change the workplace to be able to contribute to a better future.
So, does the office have a future?
So, the office has a future. We actually refer to the physical environment not as just an office, but actually as the officeverse. And the idea of the officeverse is that you can work anywhere, anytime. And we kind of took a little bit of inspiration from the buzzword and hot topic of the metaverse to encourage particularly knowledge workers to think differently about where they work and when they work, to really open up these different opportunities. Obviously, we've spent, because of the pandemic, a lot of time working in our home office. There is still a need to be face-to-face in an office building or in a co-working space because of the level of creativity, trust, interaction, culture building as well, which is very important. So all of those choices, where we work and when we work, are still very relevant because we are still collaborating, we're still working together. And we actually introduced a new term, officing, to emphasize the processes of collaborating and working together. So we have office as a noun, and then we have officing as a verb.
Okay. Office Shock, Future Shock, Alvin Toffler, right?
Correct.
Are you expecting the book to have similar ramifications?
We would aspire to that. Clearly, Alvin Toffler is an icon, particularly for futurists. And so Bob actually had the opportunity to work with him because Alvin Toffler was involved with setting up and founding the Institute for the Future. So sure, inspiration, but that inspiration is coming from a good place because what the Institute for the Future is focused on is being able to raise futures thinking, what we call in the book future back thinking, to enable everyone to be able to imagine that good future, to be able to create the experiences in that good future, the products and services, the policies as well, the educational models, everything, not just the technologies in that good future. And then to be able to ask the hard questions, all right, well, what do we do now? What are the choices that we need to make? And by applying that very simple framework, what future, what next, what now, to the spectrums of Office Shock, we hope that it will have an influence and an impact on helping communities around the world, not just companies, but communities, and ultimately individuals to transition to that good future.
So what do you think are the most shocking things in the book? If you would give us a couple of headlines,
Yeah. So there are a couple of shocking things or provocative things in the book. We really do believe in a couple of areas there are some fundamental choices that need to be made. Number one, and this is the first spectrum of office shock, is around purpose. You talk a lot about purpose, and we believe that moving from individual purpose, fulfilling my own needs, has to be balanced with fulfilling a collective need. So that collective purpose is really what has enabled humanity to survive and come so long. And that's why those stories are so important. Narratives are essential to be able to bring people together into a more collective purpose. We do see evidence that having shared purpose is better for health, it's better for development, it's better for business. So we do see the importance of having that collective purpose. So that's one area that, again, is a shock in the sense that we need to be thinking and acting differently.
Because you could say that, you could argue that today the collective benefit has kind of shrunk away in this world of polarization, right? To where you think about your own benefit and you don't want other opinions and you want to keep separate from people, especially, of course, in the US and UK and the whole polarization and the Brexit and all these discussions. Right?
Absolutely.
You could think that people want to stay away rather than do collectively, right? So this would be
you're absolutely right,
and key message.
And that's why it is a bit of a shock to be able to have that message to say, hey, we need to find ways to come together with more collective purpose. And very tied to that is the second spectrum, the spectrum of outcomes. And that spectrum the choices range from profit to prosperity. Now, profit is pretty straightforward. Prosperity is a bit of a buzzword, and you may say that kind of hints at a bit of greenwashing. But in the book, we actually are very, very explicit. We draw on a lot of the work from the economist Mariana Mazzucato, who looks at this, purpose-led capitalism and finding shared value. At the end of the day, and we do bring a number of examples in the book, it comes down to ownership. So do you own the means of production, or do I own the means of production? Do you benefit from the fruits of the production, or do I? Or do we do it together in partnership models? Or, to go the next step, we see employee-owned models, cooperatives, for example. Now, cooperatives have a bit of a, shall we say, a negative tint to them. However, we do see, because of the technologies, platform cooperatives are potentially becoming a way to overcome some of the bureaucracy and other issues with old school cooperatives and to revitalize them in a way, for example, the co-op taxi service in New York City. So they're using a gig economy platform, which companies like Uber have used to exploit drivers, but this is driver owned. And so that's, I think, a good signal that changes are happening. Now, clearly there's Patagonia, but that's a bit of the, the poster child, but it is a bit of an outlier.
But isn't part of the discussion about this also what Mariana Mazzucato keeps saying, this old definition that we have of what things are, like capitalism, communism, socialism, other isms, right? All these things are becoming kind of useless because they've outlived their usefulness in terms of examples, and now we have this unique chance to reinvent all of these things, right? So people ask me about this and say, oh, well, that's communism or so, like the collective, I'm like, no, this just makes sense, right? And it probably made sense when Marx wrote about it, but the reality was a little bit different. And now we're here kind of going back to this concept and reinventing them for the future, right? Because the future isn't going to be about this repetition or improvement of capitalism, I don't think, right? Mm-hmm. It is fundamentally a different agenda when you're looking at collective benefit, right?
It's interesting. In the appendix, we've got a footnote with about a dozen different or new isms, including eco-capitalism. And I agree with you, those terms don't really help us because they carry so much baggage. They carry so many stories that really cloud the ability to have clarity on, what is ownership in the good future? How will we share the financial rewards of our cooperation? how will we empower people so that they not only have more in their pockets, but they are also seeing that there is more equality in the communities that they're living. That's essential to also achieve that first and probably most important spectrum on purpose. Now, all of this is connected with our other spectrums. And maybe just to put out another one, the critical one, I believe, is about belonging. So that's after climate, and I think climate is relatively straightforward. Belonging is a fundamental shock, and the shock is neurological. The shock of neurological belonging is that we all programmed, hardwired to want to be with people who look the same, who sound the same, who smell the same, who have similar backgrounds, or at least you're able to make comparisons, my background to your background, okay, my culture, I can make comparisons. So that is the way that we are hardwired. Now, for us to really create a sense of belonging, we need to go beyond, again, another quote, ism of DEI, diversity, inclusion, and we've got to actually work, engage, and embrace people who are different. And that is a major shock to the system, literally.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's part of the discussion that we've had a few times. It's like younger people especially think of themselves as belonging to the global thing, the global consciousness. And, when I was young, I was thinking I was German, or then later I was American. But if you speak to people that are 25 years old now, they think of themselves as being European, right? If they're here, or kind of global, like they could be anywhere, right? Also because they don't work in the office anymore, right? So that is a major shift. I think that's a good sign, but it's also creating a lot of friction between the old system of how you get paid and where you do your taxes and the whole social structure and all these things. I mean, I often wonder, for example, how if all of the new jobs are in the cloud and online and virtual, do we need a global security system, for a social security system for that, which we don't have. Everybody's fighting on their own now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might actually be the opportunity with climate change. So climate change is our third spectrum, to actually begin putting into place some of those policies. In our book, we talk about the spectrum of choices between net zero, that we said has got to be the baseline, to regenerative. Now, regenerative, again, is going towards being a bit of a buzzword. We refer to a few examples of regenerative economies being very local, many of them integrating both agricultural and business activities. A classic example are some of the rooftop gardens in Brooklyn. So seeing how breaking down those silos between an agrarian economy and a more financial economy and livelihood, all of that coming together into a community is really at the heart of regeneration. And I think if we're able to make progress on that, because that's something that is less, I would say, less contentious in most circles, not all circles, but in most circles, ideally the kinds of regulations that are going to be coming, particularly in the EU, regarding climate, regarding circular economy, recycle, reuse, repurpose, that could provide the basis for then putting into practice some of the choices and policies for more sharing of economies, for different kinds of business models that are more equitable, and then ultimately influencing the social structures where there is less division and there is more inclusion.
That sounds like a positive model for the future. So who should read the book?
So we encourage, and this is really part of the last section of the book, individuals, companies, and communities to think about the hard choices. Specifically, anyone in those three segments, if you will, that are interested in imagining a good future, in creating the experiences in those good futures that are meaningful, meaningful experiences. And that ideally will help mobilize, and we also refer to, because we've got a number of metaphors related to music, it'll ideally synchronize between the different choices. One of the biggest challenges of bringing anyone any group of people together. Human beings are always going to have, if two human beings, probably three opinions at least. And so we talk about the importance of harmonizing choices and synchronizing choices. I do believe that technology, and particularly visualization of data, whether it be AR, VR, or just a nicely designed data visualization, will help people see, oh, your choices are here, my choices are here, our neighbor's choices are here. We live together. We should be collaborating and working together in order to be more circular, in order to have more collective purpose, in order to be able to share the fruits of our labor. So let's see where the gaps are, and let's just have a conversation about that. Again, the spark of the book was to have a conversation about the workplace. It turned into a much more holistic conversation about business, about society, and ultimately individuals. We've gotten some feedback that maybe office shouldn't have been in the title. That's the trigger, okay? Pandemic, people asking the question, are we in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week or home office? That's good, but it's just the beginning. And we've absolutely got to be thinking holistically, systemically across these 7 spectrums to be able to make those choices if we truly are interested in transitioning to a good future.
That sounds good. So Office Shock, right here it is. I'm going to keep this one.
This is for you, Gerd.
Joseph Press and Bob Johansson, of course, and Christine Bullen. So thanks for telling us about this book, and everybody should get it now.
Thank you, Gerd.